Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, where we elevate marketing leaders inside and out. I'm your host, Veronica Rami, master marketer, executive leader, and mentor to ambitious marketing leaders wanting to advance their careers. Each episode is filled with genuine, unscripted conversations with some of the world's top marketing experts, accomplished leaders, and industry trailblazers representing brands, both large and small. Our goal with this podcast and everything we do is to help you master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into an industry-leading Rainmaker. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. Welcome back to the Rainmaker Podcast. When I say that I have never had a guest like this on the show, I have never, ever had a marketer with this level of visibility, criticism, controversy. I just haven't. And that's because we have the former campaign manager to a US president in modern political history. Now, quick note, we recorded this podcast before the United States concluded our general election in November 2024. I'm actually recording this intro even before I know the results of the election. The reason I decided to hold off on sharing this with the public until after the election, because I didn't want it to take away from the conversation. This is not a subliminal endorsement of any political party. Personal politics does not matter at all. Hear me when I say this. What you're listening to is a conversation with a marketer from the American politics arena. We've told stories about marketers in sports marketing, in consumer goods, in online education, in agency life. We've told so many incredible Rainmaker stories from different industries. We've never had this. We've never been able to showcase the marketer's come up story in US American politics, which is, could we argue the hardest arena? He talks about his death threats. He talks about the effect that it had on his mental health and his family. He talked about his well-being. I was shocked at the level of candor. He was honest. He was funny. He was vulnerable. I think you'll be shocked at how much you're going to actually enjoy listening to Brad, regardless of your own political affiliation, because he is that disarming. So with that said, let's just get into it. Please welcome my guest, Mr. Brad Parscale, the former campaign manager to U.S. President Donald Trump. Brad, welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, no, thank you for coming. I know we were kind of conversing just informally before we push record, and it means a lot to me that you're here and you're giving me your time, because I know you've been on the circuit, you've done a lot of news, you've done a lot of media and speaking engagements, and I am just add my name to the list. I want to pick your marketing brain. Your story is unlike anyone else's I've ever had on the Rainmaker Podcast. I mean, we've showcased a lot of guests and like their come up stories in marketing. We've shown the story of like intern to chief something, right?
Yep.
You have a wild ride, to say the least. And I kind of want to start with that. Let's explore your come up story, because how does somebody go from building websites and having an agency? I'm a former agency owner myself, to then being the campaign manager for a U.S. president. Like, that's wild.
It was a wild ride. The only thing I haven't left to do is to maybe go to space with Elon, but almost everything else I've done. Actually, my story is not told very well. And the reason is when you were in the position I was in,
sure,
people want to rewrite the story to make you look like a villain from Batman. And you would think that I've killed people and murdered babies and destroyed the world. But that's not, here's there. I actually got started when I was 12 years old, 1988, writing code. And my father actually wrote a patent. He was a lawyer at the time and wrote a patent for a thing called the video toaster, which was the very first video editing machine ever built in the world. I grew up working in that company and in restaurants and doing back and forth, but I had this niche for computer programming and playing on computers and doing stuff. And actually the first company I owned, which no one talks about, was a 3D animation company called Electric Image in the late 90s, 2005, I owned it. And that was actually where I got started. And I got started with 3D animation and loving the idea of creating virtual worlds and letting computers tell a story. I was always a storyteller. I was a bad business person at the beginning. I didn't understand the cash flow. And I thought that just talent is how you beat Microsoft. Yeah. That's not how it works. Yeah. Started my own advertising agency called Parscale Media, eventually merged with a lady named Jill Giles, became Giles Parscale. And they act like I was a lonely web designer. We were the largest digital agency in Texas. We had almost 100 employees, 100 million in revenue.
800 clients, I read, right?
Yes, almost 800, it was 760 clients. I've had everything from the Jenner family, the Trumps, and we were a big agency.
Yeah.
We were affordably priced because we were in San Antonio, Texas, but had New York and California skill sets. So my idea and vision of that company was to build the most innovative technical marketing company in a place that was so cheap that I could compete with everybody. That obviously got the eyes and interest of Donald Trump eventually. The way I met Donald Trump was a woman on a Delta Airlines flight or whatever it was, named Kathy Kay, got my number from one of my very first customers.
Wow.
Calls me and says it, looks down, I guess, in her purse in the middle of a board meeting with Trump and all Trump kids and says, I know somebody, we should call him.
Oh my gosh.
And that was 15 years ago. And then February 21st, 2015, I get an email from Amanda Miller, who was the woman who sat at the front of the Apprentice, said, Trump's thinking about running for president. Do you want to help? I replied back, yeah, sure. And that was the first time I did anything in politics. Wow. And I rose to the top. And really, it's because presidential election versus small elections is a giant marketing operation.
Yeah.
It's the largest, I've spent billions of dollars. It is cage fight marketing and advertising with one day. You don't get a day where you get it wrong and you get to go the next day at Walmart and change your thing. You got to do everything perfectly right, marketing. And then when you take my style and structure of data leads to content, leads to distribution, back to data, it's a perfect day. You can only, it's a no-hitter or a nothing. You don't get to go out and practice the next day. You have to wait 4 more years and you get a new product. Well, not the last 3 elections, we haven't got a new product, but not talking about politics, but it's just that it's a 4-year ramp, a couple year ramp up, hundreds of employees, billions of dollars spent, 1 day marketing effort to show people up. So that now cascades for me down into movies and other things now.
Sure.
But it is the UFC of marketing.
That's actually a phenomenal analogy. I've been to one in-person cage fight. And at first I walked in like, this is disgusting. This is like watching the bulls get skewered in Spain. Like, why do people do this? Fast forward 90 minutes, I'm like screaming, let's go. Like, I think it was like all the testosterone that was like osmosis into my body. I don't even know. I just like got like enthralled, like gladiator style. I'm like, oh, this is
when I was on stage election night, when we won in 2016, it was a feeling that you could never imagine. Think about every ounce of your energy into this election, into one moment where you wait to say, did you win Pennsylvania or not? And you're just like, and it's literally, it changes your life in one direction or the other. And for me, my 2 choices were this: bankruptcy, because I put everything into it. Literally, bankruptcy, life has to start over again, or win and you're on 60 Minutes and the world thinks you did it. And that was my day in November of 2016, was my life fork was one way, the direction or the other. And then I tried to do it again, which is,
yeah, that's a whole other story.
And people don't understand the mental toll it takes on you. 20,000 death threats, all kinds of stuff. So this is when I made cage fighting, I had 3 armed guards wherever I went because people thinking murder me stops things from happening.
Yeah, no, I would imagine
So it's full combat marketing.
It just gets better, it gets worse, like full on gladiator. Part of what I do is I mentor other aspiring marketers that I deem rainmakers because we make it rain. And mental health is a weekly conversation that we have amongst our group. And it's funny because I usually tell them, like in my coaching sessions or my mentorship sessions, I'm like, marketing, it's not brain surgery. You're not going to murder anybody, or you're not disarming a bomb. But honestly, the way that you describe marketing in the political sphere, it might as well be like you're performing brain surgery, where like if you nip the wrong thing, I mean, it feels life or death.
I'll give your listeners one mental health thing. You can't control the past with regret. You can't control the current with anger and frustration. You can't control the future with anxiety. Most of us try to. The only thing you control is what you think, who you trust, and what you do. And as soon as you get rid of anxiety will overwhelm you in marketing and advertising because you can't predict the future.
Right.
It's like no one's going to bat 1,000. No one's going to hit every shot.
Right.
But Wayne Gretzky said you miss 100% of shots you don't take.
Love that.
And so the idea in marketing and advertising is to take risks, but you can't let the anxiety in the thing. And that took me almost 50 years to figure out. And so I always thought I could control the outcome with anxiety and control the people around me with frustration. And you can't do that. And so one of the biggest lessons is do your best, let it go. And then as Mike Tyson wants you get punched, get back up.
Yeah. I have two little boys. I call them man cubs because that's more appropriate than calling them boys at this point. But we watched Inside Out where they did the personification of anxiety as a concept. And she's like, I was just trying to help her, like by showing her all the worst case scenarios. I was just trying to help Riley. And I'm like, what a great way of like putting into, simplistic childlike definition of what anxiety is trying to do to help you. But to your point, like it really can just, oh gosh, like
Mostly it's like an ADT alarm system. 99%
yes,
are false alarms.
yeah, yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And if you keep running to them, no one's going to show up.
Okay, look, this is what's interesting about you to me. So I know that you pride yourself, identify as more of a technical marketer, which you are. I mean, like if you look at your acumen, it's very clear where you are the gifted in your marketing prowess, right? But you are also wicked savvy because correct me if I'm wrong, you winning one of the Trump websites or one of the assets early on was because you like underbid to get their attention. Is that not true?
Do you want the story?
Yeah, of course I want the story.
So I was sitting at IHOP having breakfast,
Mhm.
and I got a alert on my BlackBerry, and it said, "Hey, call Kathy K." I called the number; it was a wrong number. I googled the woman's name; it was Kathy K, the CEO. I called the phone. She's like, "Ring, ring, it's Trump." She's like, "Oh, Brad, thanks for calling back." I didn't remember I'd called her. We talked 6 months before when she was at Sotheby's, and I kind of was confused. And she said, "Hold on, I see Ivanka walking by. Let me grab her." So first phone call, I'm talking to Ivanka Trump,
Yeah.
at IHOP. And so I'm like, check, please. I need to get to my car at least. And I sell her for 30 minutes. And I at this point, I'd only been to New York once in my life. I was a redneck kid from Kansas.
Yeah.
But I convinced her, I think she said, you know what? I think there's something about you. Can you send us a bid? And I'll send you all the information. She emails me all the information. So I go home, talking to my girlfriend and my wife at the time. And I said, what should we do? We're rednecks. So like, wait 3 days, like dating rules. Don't send it too soon. Don't be too anxious. And I was like, how should I price it, you think? And I said, what the Price is Right rules? It was like $1, But then I was like, that seemed too little. And so I actually ended up bidding $10,000 for the website. I know it's way under it, and I send it to them. A couple of days later, I get a call from Eric Trump, and Eric's like, Brad, I don't know if you're stupid or you're missing a zero, but you underbid everybody by 100,000. I said, sir, here's the truth: is like, I'm doing all this work myself. I can do everything you see myself, and it won't cost me nothing but time. And then he's like, well, what do you want in return for doing it for so cheap? And I said, I want you to call the local newspaper and tell them if I know it, I do a great job. I want you to call San Antonio Express News and tell them it's the best website, the best web work you've ever gotten.
Wow.
And so he ended up doing that. That exploded our business because now this is the time when Trump said Apprentice. The Apprentice is saying the best web guy isn't in New York, not in Florida.
Yeah.
It's this guy in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Well, if you're my competition now, well, yeah, Joe Sally, the restaurant, says I'm great. Donald Trump says I'm the best. And where I was living at the time, that was just like, a small business owner, mostly conservative Republicans are like, it was like scooping up clients. I just walk around town and get clients. And so I made the impression is his $100,000 worth $100 million of advertising I get out of this? Yeah. And to me, it seemed like a no brainer, but Eric was confused. We're now friends for 15 years, but like, he tells a story later. He's like, I just thought Brad was stupid. Like I was going to take advantage of him. But I flipped the whole thing around, which was, everything's about incentive structures and what value it. I always say the way to climb the mountain is not the way to get on the other side of the mountain is not climbing it. It's actually digging under it. And you have to be able to sacrifice to get from your current reality, which is an acquired taste most of us don't like, to your transcendent there. You got to go through a pit of despair. And what is that pit of despair that creates that transcendent there? And for me, it was self-sacrifice today for tomorrow.
Yeah, but again, that requires a level of maturity, I think, forward thinking, visionary type of mindset to even think that way, because like, yeah, that seems obvious now, but not then, right? Like I think about all the high stake clients I had when I was running my agency, and like, I bid high. I'm like, oh, high stakes, high. Like I'm gonna make sure I allocate enough in the budget to make sure we can pour 2x the amount of time allocation, right? Like that's how you think as an agency owner, but you were like, no, this is more of, it's so funny as agencies, we like chase these accolades and awards, like top this and top that. And like,
I never care about
or you chase the features, like featured in Forbes or this or that. Like we want all of these things to put on the websites to give the, the credibility or whatever. And you're like, no, I just need the endorsement of this, and this is
The
how I'm going to
guy.
do. I'm going to earn it. I'm
Yeah.
going to earn it, right?
And you got to remember, at this point, he's not political.
No,
He's the
right.
guy.
He's
He's
reality
like the
star.
#1 TV show
Yep.
on television. He's been in movies.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't even know he was interested in running for politics back then. Like, no one really did. He talked a little bit on Oprah once or something. Like, no one thought he was going to actually do it. And so then all of a sudden, I actually thought on the day when I got the first email, it was a joke. Like, I thought Trump was just joking with me. Like, I didn't really think he was going to run.
Okay, so let's take us to that moment, because this is what's wild. Because correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't before you and the Trumps relationship, you didn't have any political aspirations. That wasn't kind of on the board.
I mean, I was Uber driver zero. People don't know that in San Antonio. The year before Trump ran, I'm the one that got in talk with Uber and said, I really did not like what was happening with the medallion thing and the cartel of taxi drivers. I didn't think that was a free economy action. So I actually fought for Uber thinking this was good. I thought it was great for veterans.
That's
so I had a little bit of political aspirations. I'd helped some people, but
not like this.
Did I ever think that I was going to be sitting in the Oval Office with my feet up on the Resolute desk?
No.
No. Do I think that I'd have an office pretty much on Air Force One? No.
No.
But man, did I go.
Okay. And this is where I want to pick your technical brain, because I in preparation for our meeting today, I was listening to some of your previous speaking opportunities and seeing your kind of philosophy around how you did what you did. And again, your framework and everything. But the one thing that really struck me, again, I teach leaders how to be leaders. You talked about it on one of the stages about how most campaigns are run in silos, where your direct mail team does not communicate with the digital team's not communicating with the TV team. And you were like, we're not doing that. Everything was centralized. You were still obviously hyper specific in audience segmentation, but everything was centralized. And part of me, I'm like, well, that's really impressive. And then part of me, logistically, that seems like oh my gosh, how many people reported to you, that, just the volume of work and oversight. I can't even begin.
So that's about leadership style. And
Yes.
So in most companies, you're thinking like this. You sit at the top and we all serve up. I do this.
Right.
I sit at the bottom of my company.
Okay.
I serve the most, and I do everything through freedom V's. So most campaigns, marketing, political organizations, all this, run a shame culture. That shame culture is you make a mistake, everything has to be perfect. And so we run to not mistake. We run for a perfect game. However, if you really want to have a great marketing company, if you read something like Creativity Inc. and some of these others, is you have to move towards a creative culture. And a creative culture celebrates mistakes.
Okay.
And to celebrate mistakes, you have to run towards mitigation, not prevention. So 99% of political campaigns and marketing campaigns I see run a prevention system. If you make a mistake, you're shamed, everything is. So that is actually causes you to be less effective and to actually not centralize things. Because now, if you're the TV team, you want to go over and be perfect. So if the mail team does something wrong, they're not blamed for it. So by mitigating or by preventing ourselves from interacting and reducing our freedom V, we don't make mistakes. So if you look at the most successful marketing campaigns and advertising and political campaigns, it's usually a mitigated situation where when we make errors, we laugh about them and we say, well, good job for being creative. And wow, you're going to be a better staffer. Now go out. You might have been reduced to my freedom V a little bit, but go back and earn it. And so what I was actually doing was protecting my team from their mistakes by taking ownership of all of them and then allowing them to be free. And what I was doing was I was producing this massive machine that in 90, 100 days, Hillary Clinton created 65,000 ads or something like that. We created 5.8 million ads. Yeah. And people's heads go like, how is that possible? And then now all of a sudden I had an army that was wanting to do this. And then I was serving them into that. And so I call it servant leadership style. And it allows to really grow at scale. You saw that a little bit in Steve Jobs' book and other things, 7 people reported to me and all these other people. But what that meant was I give them the freedom to be creative. Yeah. And if you look at the Apple before Steve and the Apple after Steve, you can see the difference of creativity because they went from a mitigation and creative culture to a shame perfect culture.
It's really interesting. Again, I'm just blown away by your perspective, just how you frame things, how you see things. Okay, I have this is something I want to talk to you about, and I desperately want your perspective on this. This is in writing my book, which I shared with you right before we turned on the camera, my identity marketing book that's coming out.
I read your site. So.
Oh, thank you very much. So I'm writing this book, and I'm there's a section of the book about like the undeniable power of identity marketing and how when leveraged correctly, it can do these impossible things. And I think
Mm-hmm.
obviously Donald Trump's 2016 campaign is a form of that to me, right? The MAGA,
100%.
right? Make America Great Again. But as I was doing my research, what blew my mind and I didn't know was that Ronald Reagan actually technically said a version of it first in
Mm-hmm.
his 1980s
Yeah.
presidential
Trump was there.
campaign,
Trump was
right?
there at the convention. Yeah.
Yeah, so he said, so Ronald Reagan said, let's make America great again. And it
Mm-hmm.
was almost like an inclusive identity marketing play. Like we are, right, everybody's invited. We are all Americans. Like let's all of it.
At that time, you had Morning in America going on, so that was his big. That was his big push. It's the 76 to 79 had just been a disaster.
Yep.
Iran,
Yep.
oil crisis.
Yep.
Let's just say Jimmy Carter's presidency was not one for the textbooks.
Yep.
And so now I said it was, and now we're going to the 1980s, electronics, and what Reagan really understood is a master marketer, honestly, and a great orator.
Yes.
Probably one of the best orators in history.
Yes.
And says this moment, and it encapsulated the feeling and emotion to the entire generation.
Yep.
And so those were the baby boomers. And
Yep.
the baby boomers, this is our morning. We're going to bring in the new country. And I think the baby boomers then make the 80s happen the way it did.
Sure.
This unbelievable growth in America, all the things. It was and look, it was the height of the Cold War as well. And so it was, this commercial comes out, Morning in America. He says, let's make America great again. And what he actually does for the first time ever, I really believe this. We had the first consumer president in Ronald Reagan. And so he was a consumer product. We've had populist presidents, McKinley and others, McKinley is very famous, 1896. I believe if I want to talk about framing really kick, the first president to really do this is 1896, actually.
Okay.
So William McKinley is the first populist president really chosen by the people. Before that, the parties chose. He run around on a train car and got people to get behind him, and he was kind of forced himself into position. But he's walking out on stage. And the real fight of 1896 was whether we were going to go on the gold or silver standard. Right at the turn of the century, we were finally becoming a net export country instead of a net import country, and we needed to change. So he's walking on stage. The Democrats going all crazy about why we should have silver and explain it all technically. If you're explaining, you're losing. And if you're entertaining, or you're winning. And so he walks out. He sees 2 loaves of bread. He grabs them, walks up on stage, says, I'm just going to tell you what the difference between the gold and silver standard. He breaks the one bread in half, throws it on the floor, and says, if you want gold, you get a whole loaf of bread. If you want silver, you get a half loaf of bread. What do you want? That's perfect brand marketing right there. Mm-hmm. What I'm doing is establishing a simple story into things I can relate to what it is. He goes on to win the election and becomes president of the United States. And that's framing, and that's branding identity. That is like, my brand is you get a full loaf of bread.
Yeah.
So now I'll choose gold.
Yeah.
Which has nothing to do with the other. It just, no one can actually understand the gold standard in 1896. They're not going to get it. Few people did. And so he was able to do that. And I think the next one to really do that just in an awesome way was Reagan.
Yes. Well, I mean, he won 44 states.
Yeah. I mean, Nixon did too. Nixon did too, but it was different because what was going on at the time.
Yes.
But I think Nixon won almost all. I think Reagan won all but one in 84.
Yeah.
And then he lost Minnesota, I believe.
Yeah.
In fact, I know that's just
I know you're like a walking encyclopedia of American history.
No, just this part. But anyways, people don't really understand how much marketing is in politics. Now, what's happening right now, you're seeing the Democrats coming back marketing.
Yes. Trump
has turned into something else now. It's not about marketing. It's not as pure the marketing as back then. I'm not saying anything negative about him. He's choosing his campaign. But like 2016 was a pure marketing campaign. That's what it was.
Well, so this is my take, and this is why I like your perspective. I want to hear your perspective, because it's like, as I did my research, I'm like, wow, like here's 2 successful presidential candidates who won their elections, one in 1980, one in, obviously 2016. They basically have the same slogan. I would say it's an identity marketing play, but I felt like it was a different emotional palette that they dipped into. Like,
oh yeah,
Ronald Reagan was more inclusive with the play, where I felt like Donald Trump, Make America Great Again, wasn't for all Americans, but there was almost like an element of like the greater American, or what one American felt like, which is why now if you see people driving around with like over the top American flags, you automatically think, without even seeing the bumper sticker, like, oh, that must be a Republican of some kind, right? Mm-hmm. And so I felt like Make America Great Again, Ronald Reagan was inclusive. Make America Great Again, Donald Trump was exclusive. Like, it excluded there was a differentiation between some Americans that were more patriotic versus some that were not, some that wanted a better future versus that were not. But I'm curious on you, because I mean, you were in the inner sanctum and you're the one distributing that messaging through social media and through advertising.
I will tell you that I don't think there was ever any intentionality to be exclusive.
Okay.
I think that you could make the argument that somehow, I think that mostly that came over because of illegal immigration. And I think that the media does the media has its own incentive structure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And their incentive structure is to get clicks.
Sure.
So you got to understand, when you're a marketing engine fighting the mainstream media, it's a difficult position because they have more power than you do. You're advertising in the middle of them talking, right? And so they have an amazing ability to change how we see things. Look, is Donald Trump probably says some things and that I don't agree with? Yes. I mean, everybody could say that. Every single person on earth. Now, does he make us also question things? And is the country a different place? I think it's actually going to be better off long term. I think that if you look actually at last year of Congress, we did more bipartisan bills. No one's going to tell you that. I think the real attitude was to remind people what it meant to be American and in the spirit. Mm. And I think the idea was, one of our most clicked ads was like Donald Trump on a space shuttle with a something in his hand and a cowboy hat on. And what that identified was with that great time that Americans felt like unity. Now, remember, Ronald Reagan used fear. I mean, fear was a huge tactic then. I mean, 1980, kids are still practicing how to deal with nuclear fallout in grade schools. Yep. 1980, you had people worried they were going to be able to fill up their cars. You invented fracking yet. Oils, we're getting it all from the Middle East. There's tensions. You just got out of the 72, Israel war. Kind of thing. And I think all of that tension led to fear. And then you take today, Trump used fear as well, but I think it was more a fear of, are we losing what America stands for? And I think most of that pressure came from the universities. When the universities are saying, hey, we're not going to have Christmas light, it offends the Muslims, and we do this, we do that. And when American traditions became wrong is where this thing came from. But, again, those are all marketing things. I mean, look, when you buy, all kinds of stuff, they use these same tactics. If you go, you got to have this car, because my car that goes 104 seconds, I need now to go 103.9 seconds. And I need to sweat around this curve. And I need to do all these things. They're using all these same feelings. Volvo does it all the time. If you don't put your kids in your car, they'll die of this car crash, right? That's like every commercial says, is a car crash. And it says, you'll only live if you're in our car. Oh, I'm going to die if I'm in a Ford, which is not true. Right. And so, but like all of these things are the same tactics. Remember, as I was telling you before, there's only 6 real ways of persuasion. I really believe in that book, I was telling you earlier.
Yes, we love that book.
Influence. And I said, I just happen to have a copy because I give a couple away this week. People ask, like, how do you get this thought process? Like, I read a book here.
Well, can I ask you about because you and I were talking about this earlier before we even push record about framing. And again, the example you gave was the border, which I thought was such a great example. But also, didn't you guys do that with framing around MAGA too? Because again, you can package it one way, you could package it another way, you could package it depending on the recipient. So tell the people what you said before we turned on the camera about framing, because I thought it was such a great example.
Yeah, so I'll give a little color to it. I did too last time. So I was in a car. I was going to go speak at there was a kid in the front seat. I was in California in a Tesla.
Classic.
And I knew that it was probably not a Republican. And he said, "Oh, I saw your picture. You're speaking at this thing or something." And I was like, yeah, "I'm speaking at this event." And he said, I don't just read your politics, but I was reading about you. I Googled you, and I just happened, you're in my Uber, and I'm like, okay, that happens. And especially during my more famous years.
Get nervous.
Nah, that's fine. I'm 6'8", 260.
Yeah, because you're huge.
I said, here, let me teach you what this is frame. I said, I'm going to give you 3 different positions. You're going to give me 3 different answers. And on the position, he said, or how strong do you feel like you're on illegal immigration and the border? And he's like, man, I'm salt. Like, this is tell everybody why I'm with, the report. He goes, okay. I said, let's build a wall. Oh, no. Well, and he did the normal talking points. I said, yeah. I said, why? Because it's a bad policy. It conflates against the policy of love thy neighbor, which is a human value, not policy, of value of love thy neyghbor. We tend to be value oriented when we make our decisions. Yes. It's a shameful thing to not love your neighbor. Now, Trump's from Queens, New York. You don't love your neighbor, probably. So, but the rest of the country and most of the rest of the world says we love your neighbor, right? Yes. So that's one. He's all against it. 2, I said, okay, just leave it wide open. Let's move all South America into California at once. well, we couldn't really do that. That's not reasonable. It's not going to happen, but we could try to care about people. I said, okay. All right. Number 3, I said 86,000 kids were trafficked across the United States. 30% of them trafficked for sex, and 14,400 of them will be returned from the last 2 years, will be returned to South America and harvested for organs on the black market. And America has the highest consumption of sex trafficked kids, mainly between the ages of 8 and 14.
Yeah.
I said, are you okay leaving the border open with all them crossing? No, if that's true, then why aren't we closing the border? And I said, that's frame. All the same policy is close the border. Now, how you craft that message is important. If you notice now, the Republicans have moved from, might or might not had some pressure on this, of moving from build the wall to stop child trafficking. So now you see movies like Sound of Freedom coming out. You got City of Dreams this weekend coming out. I don't know when this comes out, but like it's coming out this weekend. Which is stories about trafficking kids. People are starting to look at the border differently. Like, okay, it's humanitarian to bring them all in, but I don't know if you saw, we've lost 200,000 of the kids that come across. The government doesn't know where they are.
Yeah.
Well, what if 100? It used to be that we would shut down the whole country if one person would die. Now we're okay with 10,000 kids having sex with old creepy
Adults,
men, and we're okay with that. We're okay with them being leased to each other. I mean, a doctor in Texas just got arrested for leasing a kid.
Yeah. Can I ask you about this? Because this is I get this question a lot, me personally, as like a marketer of 17 years. And then I always just kind of slightly die a little when people are like, I hate marketing. I'm like, no. So like, I get that marketing can be perceived as this villainous force because marketing equals manipulation. I'm like, no, marketing can also be, let's redefine it as ethical persuasion. So my question to you, because again, politics is a really interesting sphere. Where do you draw the line between being really, really good at your job as a marketer and being highly persuasive, but then also like now we're talking straight up manipulation of someone's belief system in order for them to do what you want them to do? Like, where do you wrestle with your own kind of moral compass on that?
Interesting question. First is, I think marketing and advertising are two different things.
Okay.
Advertising is a tax on bad products. So marketing is about content. Content's always going to be king.
Sure.
Distribution's queen. She wears the pants, right?
Yeah.
So now to your second question. If I read my own news about myself, I would feel like I'm morally conflicted because of their framing of me.
Yes.
But if what I've done of myself and what I did do and what everything's ever been proven and for every 100 hearings I had was when the truth came out, I actually believe in most things we did. Now, look, I think that people would make the moral argument to me was his rhetoric, at conflict. I don't think anything I produced had that. Now, people will tell me saying that I said, close the border, I'm racist. I don't believe that. I lived in San Antonio for 20 years. I'm a person who loves other cultures. I go all over the world, love South America.
Of people.
But the difference is, yes, I had a very diverse workforce, mostly female,
I would imagine,
and
Texas.
a very large female workforce. They were just more talented, And I think the problem is when you talk about the border is if you talk the framing, close the border because we don't want brown people to come. Yeah, that's horrible. I don't agree with that. We want to stop. I want to close the border because I don't want illegal cartel slavery. America is now the largest country of slavery. So if you took a news story and you reported it from me that way, it's like Brad's a perfectly good person. And if you say Brad doesn't like brown people, wants to close the border, then I look like an ass. Sorry, a-hole.
You can say ass.
So it's like, this is a conflict each other. So if I took everything and I sat here and we did a whole podcast about each element, I would tell you this is how I believed in it. I don't think I did anything that I didn't believe in. Honestly, what's funny is you go to other countries, like in Peru, like there's 35 different parties and there's communists and crazy different ideas. In America, we're really not that far apart. We're, like the Republican Party and Democrat Party is not that far apart. Like we don't want babies to die, but we want women to have choices. I mean, like they don't really want babies. Democrats want to say, I don't want babies to die. They just want to say I have the choice. That's a very thin thing of like maybe in, Russia, they can just go kill a baby.
Yeah. Well, I ask you that question personally because I think I've shared this on the podcast before, but in case I haven't, a couple years ago now, I had a very kind of like raw moment at the kitchen table. My husband kind of walked in and I'm crying. He's like, what happened? I'm like I just had this moment where, because I was chief of staff for a very big influencer. We talk about influencers, right? A very big influencer type of personalities, thought leaders, whatever you want to call them. 3 million Instagram followers, blah, blah, that type of thing, right? And I was the chief of staff, and there was things happening behind the scenes that like were going directly against my personal values and conviction, integrity, this, that, right? And so I was sitting at the kitchen table and I just had this moment where I was like, I think I'm the one that's building the golden calf that the people are worshiping. Like I'm the one making the false idols that people are worshiping. Like, oh my, like I just had this like, what am I doing with my life and my career? Oh no. And like I really wrestled in that moment. I'm like, and that's, I think that's the part of being a marketer. Like we're the gift raptors of the world. We bring products, offers, services, people to the marketplace for purchase, consumption of some kind, right? Like we're the ones that take it from the manufacturer and bring it to the people for purchase. And we decide the gift wrapping, we decide the messaging, the terms, all that. Like we dress it for its show. And so like,
I see where you're going now.
What happens if you lose trust in the product? What happens if you question the integrity of the product? And this isn't just, I'm not even talking about politics. I've worked for a software company that was like a little shaky on code. I've worked for a number of different spaces. And there always comes a point where like, not that the product ever has to be perfect for me to then be like, I will market you, because that's not realistic. But I have personally wrestled with like, when I've lost faith in the thing that I was marketing.
Yeah. If you lose that faith in those terms, the first way you said it made it sound kind of like the some of the cultural stuff. That's just tougher. But that's rare. Most people don't have to go through that. But some companies, they do. I mean, I think they're tough. I've actually just recently, I'm not going to say it on this podcast because I'd probably make news, turned down a very big religion that came to me. And I just didn't agree with some of the things they do. They were like, wanted me to boost them and, do all kinds of stuff. And not that I'm not religious tolerant. It's just, I'm not going to directly help something I believe that goes against my own faith as a Christian.
Sure.
And so, they directly, this religion says, but they thought I was a sellout. So I'm not. Like, I'm not going to take money to hurt my own faith. Now, on the product size, here's what I usually did. I actually think half the companies that came to me were crap.
I love your candor.
Yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't eat there.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, but my taste or my standards doesn't mean it's everybody else's.
Sure.
So
fair.
I usually figured if they were coming pleading for me, then they didn't really have a great product. Because again, advertising is a bad tax on bad products.
Say that again. Hold on. Say it again. That's so good. Say that again. If they came pleading for you.
I figured if they were finding me, that means they needed something to promote. They needed something, which means they're not, awesome. I mean, like Apple probably barely needs to advertise now, now they need to, but the original iPhone didn't, kind of thing, show my picture blown up, So great products don't need great marketing. Great restaurants usually don't need any marketing.
Yeah,
Best restaurants in the world don't need that. But anyways, I don't want to say that because look, that's not true for name ID, other problems. I'm talking just straight up sell my product versus others. Usually you're trying to tell a story because things are flawed. Now, also, like, I used to do all kinds of different things, like big $100, $200 million companies. And they'd come to me. Usually when they decide they need an external firm is they made a promise to the customer. They had mistakes. They're trying to fix it, trying to get better. And now they need to tell people to give them another chance. It's like the most common type of marketing, right?
That's
like,
cool.
And so do I feel like that's unethical? Like, did I work for some restaurants that I didn't think were having great food? Yeah. I mean, but like, I don't think that's really going to hurt anybody. I mean, that's their opinion. Their food's great and great. As we know, not all restaurants have great food, but the times I've been torn were mostly under my faith.
Interesting. Okay.
If you buy a bad product, like, who am I to tell you bought a bad product?
Sure.
If you went to a restaurant, you didn't like it and you fell from advertising. I mean, no company lies more than McDonald's. Look at any picture. That would be my view.
Yeah, and I appreciate, again, like I this is why I really enjoy conversing with other marketers, because we're all in the field trying to do what we do well, and we're trying to exercise our zone of genius, and we're trying to be proud of the work that we produce and who we serve and all that. And then there's these moments, these little pockets in time where there's the internal wrestle. We're not even talking about like mental health, which again, I think anybody in a rainmaking position of any kind, like my husband's in sales, I'm a marketer, like we talk about mental health quite often because it is brutal like this. And again, you've talked about it also in little doses, but like it's not like you joined the campaign and they also handed you a therapist. Like, who was on
Should have.
staff? They should have, right? Like, where's the massage therapist? Where's the actual therapist? Like, where is the support for the mental weight and load and strain of
It's
being in
not.
that type of a gladiator arena?
Look, I've gone through some stuff, and I get made fun of every day for it still.
It's
And
brutal.
you know, I unfortunately have had 3 children. 2 passed away on me, and I've had gone through a lot. Some people, you know, you hear about, you know, Taylor Swift with the one death threat. Now it's hurting her. I used to get 3, 4 a day.
Yeah.
I had 3 armed guards with me everywhere I went. I'd throw drinks at me. People try to swing at me. I had people spit on me in airplanes. Every moment, every day, every life, everyone's looking underneath every single one of my devices, trying to hack in it, trying to find anything. And honestly, everything that's online, I've lived a pretty clean life. But like, just imagine every day an army of people trying to find the worst thing out about you to
Yeah.
tell the world. And every day you live with that tension. The amount of anxiety I had, I think at one point I ended up in the hospital with a blood pressure like 160 over 120 and
Jeez.
170, 180 over 120 and not sleeping for days. And you know, you turn to self-medicate and you don't want to go down that path. But
Yeah.
look, I also was in an extreme position. Had probably the hardest job on the planet. And it's sad that we still shame that kind of stuff. I try now, and I'm working through a few good companies trying to really bring better mental health. It's one of the things
Good.
I dedicate my time to.
That's awesome.
I'm a recovered from, you know, that kind of mental stress.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, marketing and advertising, man, it's a stressful position because you're a gambler and you're gambling other people's money,
Yeah. Yep.
and you own it,
Yeah.
win or loss. And it's a tough business at the high levels. I mean, you ask some of these guys at Sony, and you know, ask Disney people right now. I mean, you know, lose $1 billion a month, and you know, it's a high stakes game.
Yeah.
The number one thing though is I had to learn to do is I don't regret anything in my past. It's my past regardless. I can't control anything right now with anger or frustration,
Mm.
and I definitely can't control the future with anxiety. And once I solve that, anytime that alarm goes off, I said that's just a false alarm.
Mm. Mm.
And that started to change me, and really kind of refine my faith in the Bible and in Jesus, and not that I'm just some, you know, out in the streets, you know, but like there's a lot in that book that helps you. You know, we forget we've been around here for a long time, and there was a lot of people before trying to help us, and just because we have this tech doesn't make us better.
Okay, well, how about this? Speaking of future, what is the future for Brad like? I know you have a software company. Like, I know that you're very much still doing the magic for lots of clients,
Yeah.
but personally, professionally, like, or even your predictions as a marketer for the future of marketing, like, I just want to, if I could get into your mind, what am I painting 5, 10 years out for you,
Yeah.
for what you see?
Well, 10 years ago, I predicted text messages would all annoy the crap out of us. And just we're doing
I
this cycle.
every day delete spam, delete
Delete
spam.
spam. Yeah. So
Suck.
my guess is the next 18 months, we're going to see a lot of changes, iOS and
Okay,
Android devices for spam email. It's all going to start going away. Text is
please.
going to get tougher and tougher. Look, I continue to say creator content
Okay.
and influencer content. I think we'll see a return of long form content in some fashions. I think telling stories is going to be big, telling original stories,
Mm,
and having a brand to have a story. A brand can't just be a pretty logo on the wall anymore. It's got to have a story. It's why.
agreed.
And I think that we're about to become a culture who understands the power of our credit card, and what's honorable and shameful will become important. I think businesses know this, but they're running to the minority
Mm,
because the minority is the only one that was paying attention.
mm,
And now the majority is paying attention to culture, honor, shame. And so businesses now have a problem. They can either run to the loudest person in the room, or they can run to the most people in the room. And they had to make the choice. And when they made the mistake, all these brands was to run to any cultural choice at all and not just be a product and just be part of a bigger story, a story of all of us. And what you're seeing now is this separation of the patriot economy, which they call, and the classic economy. And Bud Light is the perfect example of that. I think you see that with Harley Davidson now.
I
You
saw
know,
that.
I saw that. You saw that with Tractor
I
Supply.
saw that.
I think last week you saw 3 major universities remove their DEI things. Now, look, is exclusion and diversity good? It's an American value. It is good. Should it be more important than competency? No. We
Mm,
should all be, if we really want true equality, then everyone should have the equal chance, regardless of your color. But like, I think what you're seeing, and the biggest changes in marketing is going to be is all the people listening to this that hate me or love me,
sure.
is you're going to start going down a path where you have to choose a side, the minority or the majority side, or learn how to have your marketing to be inclusive, truly inclusive, which is everybody. Marketing has become exclusive since 2016 because of what happened, right? So everyone started choosing sides, and I think, or trying to bring a bigger tent, and sometimes not listen to their audience. I would say Harley is not listening to their audience. Now, I'm hoping that tension cools down, but it's going to be hard for people to do. And I would say the majority of my peers are not of my same, political, choice. So I would say I'm the farthest right marketer probably almost in the country, right? Any talents.
That's on your door frame. That's really funny.
So, like Democrats, I would say you go to any major agency, I would say 80, 90% of the buildings, are very, probably Democrat blue, company. And which is nothing wrong with that. It's just, they have to, if I was a major corporation right now going to hire one of them, I'd be like, is your bias going to show up my marketing? Is it going to cost me money?
Ooh, I like that question. Is your bias going to... Well, that's interesting because that's what you're saying. Like, it's either the loudest or the largest, right? Like, you're in this tension point is upon us, I think, as marketing professionals. As
look at it with the Palestinians right now. You have the Palestinian-Israel problem. And these problems aren't going to go away. We're always going to have a new one. You go back to the 60s. This was a thing back in the 60s as well. Companies would do you can see some old ads that were just crazy racist, right? Like if you go back to old stuff, right? And sexist for sure. I mean, go back to the 60s.
Yeah, no, of course.
Women were just these products that were supposed to be at home, right? Yes. And so look, that was wrong, but that was normal back then. Yeah. And so what is it today? What are we going to look back 20 years from now and go, oh my God, we were doing that, right? And I think that's hard. And it's also hard to judge yourself on perfection. It's always a clear picture looking backwards, right? Yeah. So, it's it's always 2020 looking backwards.
Okay, so we do this thing on the podcast to wrap it up with a bow.
Okay.
You have, just so everybody is clear, I ask all my guests beforehand, is there anything that's off the table for me to ask? And you're like, ask me whatever. I was like, okay. So you've been a great sport, all things considered. None of this was scripted. You didn't know the questions I was going to ask you ahead of time. Everything that you've answered has been literally in the moment and just you, authentically you. So to be fair, I like it when the guest actually gets the last question. So you get to ask me whatever the hell you want to ask me for the final question. You can put me on the spot if you wish to.
How much do you think your faith plays into the quality of content and your storytelling?
It's always there. I can't not always be there. It's always you'll hear me. I catch myself all the time where even if I'm not referencing something strictly from the scriptures, but you'll hear me say well, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand. I will always talk in these kind of isms, right, here and there. But I will be honest with you, I'm very careful around it. And I think it's not because I don't have anything to hide. You can see where I go to church, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's almost where I don't want to also put my pearls before swine.
There you go.
And so it's more from a protection of I don't even want to have this conversation with it. With anyone unless I choose to. And so it's not, I think it's always present. It's always there. It's in my leadership style for sure. Just internally with my own staff and my team, 1000%. And they know it, right? Yep. But I think if I'm being really honest too, it definitely influences just the things that come out of my mouth in my marketing messaging or how I craft things. Yeah.
I'm going to give you one last story then to that then.
Go ahead.
So the master marketer of the beginning was Jesus.
Yes.
Do you remember the time what he did? So he's given a sermon and he's been infiltrated by the the Romans and the guy stands up and says, should you pay taxes to Rome? Right. And so what does Jesus say? Why do you test me? So first that was framing in a question. Hey, prove to me you're not racist. All these things the media does, which is all just marketing framing. And Jesus then responds, says, why do you test me? So he deflects the framing and then says because he knows if he says yes, then he's going to lose the people. If he says no, they're going to put him in jail. Yeah. So he says, you have a coin in your pocket, and pulls up the coin, and it says, whose face on there? It says Caesar. Said, well, we're going to Caesar's what's Caesar's, we're going to God's what's God's, which is the master marketing, PR, and framing argument all in one. Now, if you can understand that, if you're listening to this podcast, whenever you're doing marketing, those are your three lessons right there into what a PR is. You never respond to their framing. You only elevate theirs. You always create your question and story. So what is it I'm trying to sell? And you always get everyone to understand it in your framing. So it's your question, not theirs. And that's how you can sell something. And, Jesus was the master. The whole Bible's a giant marketing instruction manual.
That's awesome. Can that be your next book?
I actually have a book I want to work on. It's a little bit different.
See?
I haven't got it. I can't get the title yet, but it's about the new modern terrorism and the way marketing. I don't know if you know this. Iran now has a $600 million marketing budget to play with all the rest of the world. The new Cold War is marketing, and we're all playing into it. So it's not blowing up bombs now. It's blowing up nations from the inside out. And the way you do that is marketing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Just you go in the middle of a culture and you change what's honor and shame, you destroy a country.
And you're writing this?
Yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Okay. All right. Well, you just let me know.
I'm kind of busy, so hopefully I get it done in my lifetime.
Oh my gosh. Well, then when you're done with that and you have a more peaceful chapter in your life, you can write this. Jesus Christ is the master marketer of all. And it's lessons.
We could probably do a whole podcast with just examples from the Bible.
Marketing lessons from the Bible. Stop it right now.
Talk master inclusivity.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, he figured out how to do it.
Yes, he did. And disrupt. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well,
master disruptor too. Marketing's all about disrupting.
It is. Well, pattern interrupt, right? It's just like basics 101 and we can draw it through. Oh my gosh. Anyways. Okay. Now we'll schedule a part 2. Brad, thank you very much for being on today's Rainmaker podcast.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Marketers help other marketers. So if there's a marketer in your life who could really use a new perspective in a way that helps them advance their career, please pass this episode forward, share, leave us a review. Everything helps as we embark on helping as many marketers elevate themselves inside and out. You can always visit veronicarami.com for today's show notes, additional links to some free resources and tools for you to help you advance your career. You can always connect with us on social media at @ViaRomney if you want more behind the scenes or a way for us to connect personally. Until next time, my friends, make it rain.